Okay. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Kendra Ford, and I had the privilege of chairing Virginia Blues Committee. I am here with other committee members, Annette Williams and Brianne Foz. And just want to give a little bit of a introduction, orientation to how today is going to go, and then I'll hand it over to Virginia. So during this defense, Virginia is going to offer a presentation on her work. And after her presentation, the committee, myself, Annette, and Brianne, will engage in some question and discussion with Virginia. And once we feel complete with the question and answer portion of the defense, the three of us will go into a breakout room and we'll engage in some deliberation around our decision around Virginia's defense. During that time, everyone who's in attendance here can ask questions and be in conversation with Virginia. It's a nice way to kind of take the committee out and engage in perhaps a little bit more informal, formal conversation for those of you who are in attendance here. And then once we have deliberated, we'll come back into the main room and announce our decision on Virginia's defense. And that should take us about a couple of hours. So we'll be settling in for today. So with that, I'd love to hand it over to Virginia Blue to do her presentation for her dissertation defense. And I'll let Virginia introduce the title of her work today.
Thank you, Kendra. And very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. This is a really important day for me as I defend my dissertation. Before we begin, I want to thank especially my committee members who Kendra just introduced. Kendra, Annette, and Brianne, thank you so much for the time you've given to this project and for all of your support. It means so much to me. I also want to thank Judy Checo for coordinating this event, for all your logistical devotion. And a special thank you as well to my editor, Angeline Campra, who devoted many, many hours to this project. As well, my research assistant, Beatrice Barbieri, thank you for all your help. And also a very special thanks to Liv Comby, who helped me create this presentation and make it the beautiful thing that I hope you'll all enjoy. Also to Zhao Ruizhen, Lenny, thank you for helping me prepare for this moment so much. I truly could not have done this without all of your help. I also want to thank my family and my friends. There are many, many people and places who have held me during this whole journey and endeavor. Way too many to name today, but you know who you are. Thank you so much. Thank you also to my many, many teachers and mentors, also too many to name. I finally just want to thank the earth, who has given me literally everything. And I also offer my gratitude to all of the invisible support that I've received along the way. So without further ado, I will figure out how to share my screen. Okay. So my dissertation is titled KHTHôNIA RESURGENT, a liminal feminist hermeneutic study to support restoration of the dark feminine through the development of menstrual fertility cycle awareness as liberatory praxis. This project is dedicated to my son, Elliot, who died while I was in the midst of writing the proposal for it more than 9 years ago. This endeavor has been my heroine's journey, a journey that has taken me into and through the underworld of grief, bringing me to my knees over and over through crushing sorrow unfathomable despair, and many times when I did not think I would be able to make it. It has also led me emergent again into life, where I have found and constantly rediscover that love is eternal and that Elliot walks with me everywhere. I know he has my back at all times and in all ways. I chose this image to start with because it represents cycles to me, because this dissertation is foremost about cyclicity. The spiral shape is a reflection of cycles without beginning or end, found in our bodies, in nature, and in human culture everywhere. My dissertation intends to restore and uplift a kind of cyclical consciousness as an antidote to the more linear ways of thinking that have come to dominate modern culture. While I was preparing this presentation, my daughter Avalon was on a 30-day solo backpacking trip in the Grand Canyon. This is a photograph from the canyon. And as Avalon explained to me, in the deepest parts of the canyon, near the river, there is a layer of ancient rock that is predominantly black and dark red and purple. This layer of earth is deep and dark and very powerful, existing far beneath the surface of things. KHTHÅNIA does not represent this earthy depth. She is this earth, this rock, this depth. Her name comes from Kuthon, which in ancient Greek means earth, also Chthonios, which means in, under, or beneath the earth. In Greek mythology, chthonic is a word used to describe deities connected to the underworld, as opposed to the Olympian gods of the sky. I name KHTHÅNIA as the patron goddess of this dissertation. I identify her as the divine queen of the dark feminine, embodying the power of menstruation, death, transformation, and renewal. Please note that anything on these slides that has been bolded and italicized signifies an original idea that emerged from this research. I name her in this way, which is new, though KHTHÅNIA is as old as the earth herself. She emerged through this journey and eventually showed herself to me through an essay by Italian philosopher and scholar Giorgio Agamben, who described an ancient Greek understanding of the earth deity as having two different names and aspects. The first, more well-known, is Gaia, representing the fertile soil and the green life-giving aspect of Mother Earth. And there was also KHTHÅNIA as the underworld, representing the tomb we all return to, the bedrock beneath the soil, the depths and darkness within the earth. KHTHÅNIA is ungovernable female power. She is not a goddess who exists apart and away. She is divinity that is fully material, embodied, and immanent. Not only is she the earth beneath us, she is also the earth within us. I would first like to start with breaking down some of the big words from my title. I use a multi-feminist approach because there is no monolithic feminism, only a multiplicity of feminisms. Articulating a liminal feminism allows for a dialogue between multiple perspectives and creates a space for collaboration across differences. Liminal feminism is described by the metaphor of a river, wherein the banks of the river represent various feminist lenses. Liminal feminism is the flowing waters of interaction between them. This reflects and is reflected by the flowing of the menstrual river that connects many diverse realities and experiences worldwide. Hermeneutics is a strange word that simply describes a study in interpretations of meaning. This research explores different interpretations of meaning related to the menstrual fertility cycle and cyclical embodiment. Epistemology is a branch of philosophy that deals with knowledge, considering different kinds of knowledge, the production of knowledge, and the validity of knowledge. I suggest the menstrual fertile body itself as a valid site of knowledge and knowledge production. Praxis is a word that describes action or practice that is informed by theory, which may be then engaged toward social change. The dark feminine is an archetypal representation of a human and world consciousness and energy that has been split off and demonized in multiple ways. I see menstruation as the material manifestation of dark feminine energy, as opposed to ovulation and fertility, which may be understood as the life-giving and light aspects of the feminine. This is not about reifying gender or light and dark, but about naming archetypal energies. Menstruality is a term that was introduced by Jane Severn in 2005 to describe, quote, the lifelong developmental blueprint of feminine consciousness, unquote. It may also be understood as, quote, the loom upon which the full potentials of feminine consciousness can be woven, unquote. Menstruality is a consciousness that encompasses and emerges from the menstrual cycle, and it also is an ongoing process that influences identity, perception, and spirituality throughout the meta life cycle spanning from menarche to menopause and beyond. Red School has expanded greatly on this concept, describing it as, quote, a living body of knowledge that evolves through each individual's experience, a unifying consciousness that connects us to all of life, unquote. Finally, I want to introduce my term, menstrual fertility cycle awareness, or MFCA. MFCA is a conglomerate term that I use for the study, bringing together two different streams of cycle awareness practice. The image on the left pertains to FA, which is an abbreviation for fertility awareness, and speaks very generally and broadly to any practice that helps determine the days during each month that a body is fertile. It is the basis of all fertility awareness-based methods of natural birth control, including the fertility awareness method, or FAM. FAM is a secular version of practices developed by Catholic communities as NFP, or natural family planning. And there are many different subtypes of practice. The chart here shows the measurable rise and fall of hormones and how these align with egg follicle development, ovulation, and the buildup and subsequent release of the uterine lining during menstruation. Fertility awareness-based methods are hormone-free, non-invasive, safe and effective methods of birth control. They are best learned from a fertility awareness educator so that the specificities of each unique body and situation may be engaged with this knowledge base towards the highest possible effectiveness rates. The Frank Herman study conducted in Germany in 2007 showed an efficacy of 99.4 with perfect use of the method, which is comparable to hormonal birth control methods. Fertility awareness-based methods can also be used to support conscious conception. Fertility awareness-based methods put the power directly into the hands of the practitioners of the methods through developing body literacy, as an approach to self-knowledge and reproductive empowerment in relation to each person's unique circumstance and needs. The image on the right-hand side is representative of MCA, a term developed by Red School in the UK to describe menstrual cycle awareness. Their practice is less focused on tracking biological markers of fertility and instead places emphasis on tracking physical sensations, emotions, and moods as they change throughout the entire cycle. MCA offers various methods for developing an embodied spiritual practice that arises from tending to this aspect of our lives with an attitude of reverence and care. It follows an archetypal pattern that reflects the seasons of the year, wherein menstruation is called the inner winter, the follicular phase is the inner spring, then ovulation takes place during inner summer, and after ovulation, the inner autumn gradually gives way to winter again. The archetypal cycle is just that. It describes an archetypal pattern. At Red School, they are adamant that it is never meant to be used as a measuring rod against some perfectionistic idealized cycle. Their teachings emphasize what they call the big red rule, which states that one's experience is always the primary authority. The practice of MCA deepens through meeting oneself exactly where one is at any given moment and developing a relationship with one's unique and ever-changing cycle. MCA could also stand for moon cycle awareness and so be practiced by anyone who doesn't have a menstrual cycle. Variation is the norm when it comes to the menstrual fertile cycle. And so MFCA in all cases allows for and embraces multiple truths. Most of my presentation today will cover the theoretical aspects of MFCA, but I do first want to take some time here to talk about the very basis of the practices, which revolve around multiple cycle tracking methods. This level is one's personal experience of and relationship with their own body is the foundation for all the rest of that the theory rests upon. Without this foundation, there is no ground for the praxis. It is upon this ground that the layers of theory are developed. So this slide shows the two distinct approaches to cycle tracking methods. The chart on the left from the Read Your Body app may be used for fertility awareness-based methods of birth control. The line connecting the dots is tracking changes in basal body temperature, which is the temperature of the body at rest, taken first thing in the morning. And the colored graph lines below it show changes in consistency and quantity of cervical fluid. These two measurements form a cross-reference system to determine possible fertility and then to confirm ovulation. Other signs that can be added and that can add information include cervical position and degree of cervical firmness. The hearts at the very bottom of this chart indicate penetrative sex with ejaculation and without causing pregnancy. The open hearts indicate that during the fertile wave, an alternate form of barrier method or withdrawal was used, successfully avoiding pregnancy in this case. Another highly beneficial aspect of this approach to tracking is that it provides a wealth of knowledge about one's overall hormonal health. The menstrual cycle has widely come to be referred to as the fifth vital sign. On the right is a menstrual cycle tracking chart from Red School, which is very simply designed to provide a space each day to note some keywords that describe one's mood, emotions, and physical sensations, or anything else they want to put. One could also use any kind of journal for tracking or observing their cycle patterns. As an umbrella term, MFCA includes both approaches to tracking. Some people may feel more drawn to either one, and each suits different objectives, or they may be combined. The brilliant thing about these cycle tracking practices is that they may be started at any point in the cycle or at any point in one's life, and then developed and expanded as goals shift and experience deepens. Both approaches are designed to be entirely individualized, centering the practitioner's unique life experience and needs. My personal motivation for this project began with the most profoundly spiritual experiences of my life, which were the births of my 3 children, through which I developed an interest in all things related to midwifery and the miraculous ways of the reproductive body. These experiences also took me through a healing of my relationship to my body and my sexuality through confronting deep layers of internalized shame. This catalyzed a journey of transformation through learning to love myself. Later, when I decided to pursue a master's, that is an ongoing project, by the way, learning to love myself. Later, after birthing my children, when I decided to pursue a master's degree in psychology in the first decade of this century, I was stunned and disappointed to find that there was no mention of the menstrual cycle and the ways that fertility, menstruation, pregnancy loss, and birth, let alone menopause, affect the psychology of the people who have these experiences. I began to question the relative silence around these topics within the field of psychotherapy and psychology specifically, and more generally also. After completing my degree, I circled back to study fertility awareness with midwife Sarah Bly at her School of the Well, to study fertility awareness education with the intention of exploring possibilities for integrating these fields toward challenging and transforming dominant narratives related to menstruation and the reproductive body. The shawl I am wearing in this photo was woven by my friend Tor Purit, who inspired my approach to research that involved weaving together different perspectives as many different colors of yarn, all related to menstrual fertile embodiment and reproduction, to produce the textual ground for my analysis. I learned from Max Dachu that the word text originates from the word textile. And so it is through this method of weaving that I gathered together various texts upon which to lay interpretations of meaning, to reveal patterns and textures as the basis for developing praxis. This research is offered with the intention of developing praxis as a mode of resistance to support a revolution in consciousness and healing on this planet. 2 of my primary inspirations are Bell Hooks and Adrienne Marie Brown, both pictured here. In 1994, Hooks described how theory could be developed as liberatory practice through using subversive hermeneutics. She suggested that theory could be developed in a way that was intended for healing. A contemporary example of this is Brown's emergent strategy, where such theory may be taken to the level of strategic action. Her use of the term emergence emphasizes the development of authentic relationships, both with oneself and others, through, quote, listening with all the senses of the body and the mind, unquote. Bell Hooks described theory as a location for healing, as an intervention, as a way to challenge the status quo. This quote describes perfectly why I chose to engage this as a theoretical dissertation. Emergent strategy is strategy for building complex patterns and systems of change through relatively small interactions. The relatively small interactions in the case of MFCA are the daily tracking of one's embodied hormonal changes, suggesting that from these small and intimate acts of attention and care toward oneself, may emerge capacities for community healing and global change. Before I continue with presenting my study, I want to name some of the challenges and limitations that this research encountered. First of all, there is clearly not one feminist truth or reality, but many diverse truths, all potentially valid and worthy of consideration. One potential pitfall is the risk of essentialism in equating biology with any kind of identity or experience, which I do my best to address. Also, there are many people who feel that menstrual fertile biology is entirely unnecessary, inconvenient, and should be optional. Medical research has not shown any biological necessity for menstruation so far. Also, there is a long legacy of some feminist liberation strategies equating liberation with freedom from biology. I want to make clear from the start that although MFCA centers around and celebrates the power and beauty of having natural hormonal cycles, I still fully endorse and believe that everyone should have access to all reproductive options, including hormonal birth control of all kinds. I chose this photo to illustrate a paradigm shift in perspective. On the left is how we have been taught to see the womb and ovaries. It is from an outside looking in, scientific and objectifying view. On the right is what the womb actually looks like inside the body. This image shows the subjective experience of having a womb. The importance and role of biology in terms of how it relates to female identity development is central to this dissertation and has been a hotly contested issue within feminism for many decades. What I sought in my study was to hold a both-and perspective, that gender is both a social construct and that sexual biology also influences identity development in significant material ways. This both-and perspective is meant to create a space for multiple truths to be respected. The term menstruators has been used to describe people who menstruate. It is very important to have terms that are inclusive and allow for masculine, genderqueer, and other non-binary experiences of menstruation. I introduce and use another inclusive term, the menstrual fertile body, in order to emphasize the embodied experience of the entire cycle. A clear limitation of this research is that I cannot possibly speak to all menstrual fertile experience. That would be impossible. I can only truly speak from my own lived experience as a woman, which in my case is interwoven with my female biology and my reproductive body. I chose to use the term woman in my research so that I can talk from my own perspective and experience. And this, at the same time, need not negate anyone else's experience of womanhood or of their menstrual fertile biology. Also, in some instances, women persists as a useful category for historical and political reflection because of the ways that they have been identified and treated as a group in relation to their reproductive biology. In my dissertation, I also use the term reproductive body. Although phallic bodies are also clearly reproductive, or can be, I use this term to indicate vulvic bodies with female reproductive systems. I also refer to female hormonal cycles. This is not to reify gender, but to speak of female biology in terms that are embodied and archetypal. I find that the image of yin and yang helps as a way to think of gender in terms of archetypes that represent different energies, but are not in any way fixed. My Tai Chi teacher, Henry Wong, also has taught me that this should be visualized as a three-dimensional sphere of swirling, spiraling, ever-changing, constantly interacting energies. Yin and yang as archetypal masculine and feminine, light and dark, exist in all people and all things of creation. Or as my friend, mentor, and Qigong teacher, Sarah Burden described, yin and yang are not two separate things, but a fluid continuum, a conversation. This is how I hold gender also. Over the span of approximately 6,000 years of patriarchy, values associated with the sun, with the daily cycle, with yang energies of appearance, expression, production, and beauty have been valued disproportionately against and over nocturnal values of the moon, quiet stillness, reflection, gathering, darkness, mystery, and the irrepressible pull of yin power. Although the strength of the sun changes through the cycles of the year, from winter to summer and back to winter again, and through the course of a day, it is difficult to discern the subtle changes. This has given rise to an illusion of steadiness and consistency associated with yang energy, and its cycling nature has been obscured by artificial control over and denial of seasonal changes. This has come with negative projections of unruly instability, irrationality, even madness upon the more obviously variable nature of monthly cycles. Moreover, the general devaluing of darkness has led to an imbalance in human health, energy cycles, and cultural perceptions around rest and regeneration. The practice of honoring the dark through taking conscious periods of intentional rest during menstruation, without pathologizing this in any way, is a powerful and central aspect of menstrual cycle awareness. The main goal of my dissertation was to take current MFCA practices as the basis for developing a liberatory theoretical praxis with the potential to influence positive societal change and to support potentials for cultivating collective balance and harmony. These three layers or levels of MFCA praxis are nonlinear and interconnected. The foundational layer of the praxis is individual empowerment, which focuses on self-awareness and reproductive agency as the primary benefits of MFCA practices as they are most commonly engaged today. Level 2 is reproductive conscientization, which adds layers of social, historical, and political awareness through developing consciousness that includes situating one's reproductive life within interlocking systems of oppression, with the willingness to align with and advocate for the transformation of these systems toward the liberation of all reproductive bodies. The third layer involves healing and spiritual transformation through affirming the sacredness and power of the menstrual fertility cycle, revitalizing empowering cultural narratives, and restoring holistic menstrual fertile wisdom. My central research question asked, how might MFCA manifest as liberatory praxis? It seemed clear that the foundational aspect of the practice's liberatory potential lay within its ability to support reproductive agency through the empowering nature of body literacy and the self-respect cultivated through turning toward one's experience in this way. Yet I also wondered what barriers were in the way of bringing greater body literacy, non-invasive and non-toxic contraception, and reproductive respect, dignity, and empowerment to people living within marginalized communities. How might ensuring reproductive dignity for all be a central concern of this liberation? Another question that drove this research was about the spiritual path that I sensed was available through becoming attuned to the subtle changes that were going on throughout each day of my cycle. I now believe that I was tapping into a collective spiritual awakening that was already well underway and in full effect at Red School in the UK and in other places as well, I'm sure, but I wasn't quite there yet. So this research question was formulated through wondering how this practice might manifest as liberatory, both as a social activism tool and also as a vehicle for embodied spiritual liberation. The supporting research questions then evolved. What theoretical foundations might help to develop the practice as activism? What historical, psychological, and cross-cultural perspectives would need to be considered? And what methodologies would support the research exploration along both of these lines? I came to see the reproductive body itself as colonized. And so it became clear that decolonial, transnational feminist perspectives would be helpful toward aligning the praxis with other decolonial theories and activism. A reproductive justice lens, informed by womanism, was also a central framework. Womanism is a term that was first coined by Alice Walker and describes a philosophy, praxis, and worldview that shares some perspectives with Black feminism. As my intention was to offer widely accessible liberatory praxis, it felt necessary to embrace this perspective and for my research to center BIPOC voices and scholarship. Three central organizing principles of reproductive justice that this research also espouses are bodily autonomy, dignity, and sovereignty. Ecofeminism is a transnational movement that shares much philosophically with womanism, seeking practical, embodied, local solutions to address the ecological crises that disproportionately affect poor women of color worldwide toward global healing and common weal. A material feminist lens contributes especially to situating the very material of the menstrual fertile body as a valid site of knowledge and agent of change. The embodied spirituality perspective of this study is also womanist informed and transnationally elaborated. In my literature review, I found that there was a predominant focus on disrupting menstrual stigma and on addressing menstrual policy, both important topics. There is also increasing focus on disrupting menstrual taboo in psychology and dismantling disparities in reproductive health. The gaps that my research attempts to fill include the weaving of intersectional politics with a holistic and embodied spirituality perspective. I also emphasize the importance of considering the cycle as a whole instead of either overemphasizing or undervaluing menstruation. Gayatri Spivak suggested the term strategic essentialism as a way that a marginalized group might temporarily put aside local differences in favor of identifying a collective shared essence in order to build political solidarity. It is important that such strategy is embraced from within the group and that it is not imposed externally. My research suggests that locating menstrual fertile experience as potentially unifying may lend a political consciousness that embraces autonomy, agency, and respect for all menstrual fertile bodies. Coming together around this could create a political solidarity from which to call for reproductive abolition, the abolition of all forms of reproductive coercion and control, without exception, toward unequivocal bodily autonomy for everyone. My framing of reproductive abolition is inspired by abolition feminism, articulated by Angela Davis, Gina Dent, Erica Miners, and Beth Ritchie. It is also inspired by somatic abolition, a means of dismantling racism at the level of the body, introduced by Resmaa Menakem. Presenting MFCA in support of reproductive abolition is a central political aim of this research. The key methodological tools used for my research include critical feminist hermeneutics, which considers the influence of power on the art of interpretation, and also carries the intention of creating emancipatory interpretations of meaning. Taking the menstrual fertile body as text, this research sought reinterpretations that liberate that body. A transdisciplinary approach allowed me to integrate scholarship from multiple fields to support this endeavor. The inclusion of heuristic inquiry means that my own personal process was integral through every step of the research. Phonic rooting describes an aspect of organic inquiry that describes the ways research includes subterranean roots within an invisible, deeply subjective and spiritual ground that inform the more visible methods. Additional methodological tools that I used were tentacular thinking, as articulated by Donna Haraway. The root word of tentacle means to feel, and its use describes a multi-directional and diffuse orientation enabled through the sensory intelligence of feeling, rather than taking a more linear, direct, or rational approach. Hermeneutics of love was developed by Chela Sandoval, and it mobilizes the differential consciousness of love in service of social change. Maria Lugones's method of world traveling involves the ability and willingness to develop flexible perspectives through traversing multiple realities. Love is also a part of this method, especially when it supports a loving willingness to see the world through someone else's eyes. This research was informed by Mariana Ortega's conception of multiplicitous selfhood, which combined Latina feminism, especially the work of Gloria Anzaldúa, with existential phenomenology to present new understandings of selfhood and identity as fluid, flexible, and multiple. This conception affirms the naturally fluid and ever-changing sense of self that accompanies the hormonal changes of the menstrual fertility cycle. Finally, Sonia Renee Taylor's radical self-love has been a guiding method of this research throughout. This observation from Gloria Anzaldúa is integral to my research. All responses to the world take place in our body. The reverse is also true. The world likewise responds to our bodies. And from within our bodies, we may change and thus create the world. This slide is for my grandson, Malachi, from his favorite movie, Moana. There may not be a better representation of the split in the divine feminine between her life-giving and death-dealing aspects. These are two aspects of one goddess, the lava monster Te Ka and the verdant and fertile Te Fiti, who share one heart. And it's a good visual for discussing the biggest composite word in my dissertation, which called for a bodyful ethico-onto-epistemology. This study needed an approach to understanding knowledge and knowledge production, that is epistemology, that was also rooted in the nature of being. That's the meaning of onto in ontology. And that consciously integrated ethical ramifications along the lines of my theoretical lenses. Bodyfulness is a term I first learned of years ago from calligrapher and activist Kazuaki Tanahashi. Instead of emphasizing the mind, as in mindfulness, it firmly locates consciousness within and emanating from the body. Bodyfulness suggests something inherent and emergent. As David Aretsky has noted in his unpublished dissertation, it aligns with Buddhist illuminations from the Satipatthana Sutta, which describes the practice of dwelling in awareness of, quote, body in body, unquote. I was also inspired by Charlotte Ward's term earthbodiment, which she uses to describe the interconnectedness between one's own body and the earth body. This idea informed my offering of the term earth bodyfulness as an awareness available through MFCA, suggesting a bodyful entanglement with the earth as earth, through engaging the process and cycles of nature as they express through the menstrual fertile body. All of this informs my articulation of a menstrual fertile standpoint. The suggestion is that the menstrual fertile body has access to a situated body of knowledge that both includes and transcends social location. A menstrual fertile standpoint consciousness may be cultivated that carries political weight, as well as potential for healing the split within the feminine. Findings of my research developed within 3 different categories that contributed to defining the 3 levels of praxis. The first involved uncovering the historical roots of reproductive oppression as it is experienced today. This included a survey of the last 400 years of reproductive experience, situating it within social and political contexts. The second part of the research inquired into the anthropological and mythological record to find pre-patriarchal evidence of menstruality framed as power. Finally, the third part of my research discovered a trail of healing narratives to reclaim toward cultivating liberatory futures. I began with exploring a deep root of reproductive oppression found through researching the European witch craze. Although folk beliefs related to fear of the dark feminine led to projections that formulated the idea of the witch, such beliefs are evident in many cultures throughout the world. Misogyny and gender violence were also nothing new. The phenomenon of the European witch craze of the 16th to 18th centuries, however, represented an extreme and unprecedented spike in violence against women. The most conservative estimates place the number of people killed during the witch craze somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000. 85% of those killed were women. And of these, the majority were over the age of 40. Many scholars initially and categorically denied that misogyny played any part in the persecutions. As Anne Barstow clarified, quote, "This was an organized mass murder of women," unquote. Today, the witch has reemerged as a symbol of female authority, magic, and healing power. But as Claire Mitchell and Zoe Vendatozzi of the Witches of Scotland campaign pointed out, most of those killed during the witch craze were simply ordinary women falsely and unjustly accused. They were vulnerable women, poor women, and older women. It is also important to recognize that literal witch hunting, that is hunting, persecuting, and killing women who are accused of being witches, is very much ongoing, though an underreported and under-acknowledged international phenomenon. My research considered evidence that this movement in Europe was highly legislated, a systematic top-down attack endorsed by many of the elites and Enlightenment philosophers of the time. My intention was to consider the centrality and significance of the menstrual fertile body as an object of this attack. I focused on the scholarship of Silvia Federici, who revealed 3 witch-craze tactics used to colonize the female body during the transition to capitalism during the early modern era. First, through control of their reproduction, through demonizing women's sexuality, which was evident in the proliferation of witch hunting literature that was graphic in its condemnation of women and their sexuality, and dispersed rapidly throughout Europe following the invention of the printing press. Second, as a terror campaign aimed at subjugating women through the use of public torture, mutilation, and humiliation, creating vicarious trauma in the entire female population, crushing the strong female spirit to create a new model of femininity as meek and subservient. And third, through destruction of the livelihood and life waves of the cunning women, the local midwives and folk herbalists who had cared entirely for the lifespan of women's reproductive health needs, and the subsequent takeover by male physicians and a male-dominated education system that excluded women from medicine for centuries. Federici showed that after the European women were largely subdued, the witch-crazed turned its attack. Through colonization, it refocused its violence toward the control and subjugation of the reproduction of women of color. Not only did the witch craze continue as an instrument of colonization through demonizing and dehumanizing women of color and their sexuality and reproduction, but also there was an unbroken chain of sexual violence, rape, and forced reproduction used as primary tools to establish and perpetuate the New World society. Further, race came to be constructed through multiple means of glorifying and supporting white reproduction while subjugating, controlling, and limiting the reproduction of women of color. Forced sterilization and a long legacy of non-consensual testing and the coercive imposition of invasive and harmful hormonal contraceptives on mostly poor women of color are just 2 examples of reproductive abuse that, I argue, signified a continuation of the witch craze. Enslaved women were also used without their consent and without anesthesia for surgical experimentation during the development of the profession of gynecology, a situation which this painting points to. It illustrates the power dynamic, yet without revealing the deep violence and atrocity of this situation. Deirdre Cooper Owens identified 3 of these women, Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy, as the, quote, mothers of modern gynecology, unquote, though the names of most of the enslaved women who were brutalized in this way remain unrecorded. My research traced the long history of reproductive abuse in this country and also considered the links between the development of birth control, early first wave white feminism, and the eugenics movement of the early 20th century in the US. Along with the full medical takeover of the fields of reproductive health care that had previously been the purview of local wise women, came the medicalization and pathologization of what previously had been widely understood as normal and healthy conditions of women's lives, including their menstruation and reproduction. This includes the way premenstrual syndrome has been identified and treated, and the framing of menopause as a deficiency disease. The political situation we're in now is a continuation of the witch craze, wherein control of women's bodies endures as a critical method in the attempt to maintain current power structures through reproductive subjugation. Having identified this history, the rest of my dissertation then turned to possibilities for reversing this long narrative, to seek healing, reparation, and reclamation of the reproductive body. This quote illustrates a paradigmatic and archetypal difference that reflects a shift into the next phase of my research. Garode Okruliak described that woman's time, the temporal of the goddess, is cyclical, associated with reproduction and with cosmic rhythm, with the eternal that underlies history. In comparison to the male hero's accomplishments and progress, a progress of historical succession that attempts to evade mortality by making and leaving a heroic mark in the world. My research was conducted as a heroine's journey, following the archetypal cyclical path of descent and emergence. Feminist research has centered and illuminated the importance of personal story, and this project likewise centers the personal menstrual fertility story that each individual carries. It also recognizes the relevance of collective stories and the direct bearing they have on lived material realities. An insight from Donna Haraway was that, quote, "It matters what stories we tell to tell other stories with," unquote. She suggested embracing Ursula Le Guin's carrier bag theory. Quote, "Her theories, her stories are capacious bags for collecting, carrying, and telling the stuff of living," unquote. The rest of my dissertation becomes a witch's herbal satchel, collecting the medicine of old stories for healing and restoring the menstrual fertile body to its rightful health and well-being. The first gathered story begins long, long ago. Our archaeological record reveals that Paleolithic people oriented their lives around the phases of the moon, marking these phases on bones, tusks, and antlers, creating the first calendars. And perhaps they were tracking not only the moon. Judy Grahn envisioned that when women's menstrual cycles aligned with the moon, estimated to around 4.5 million years ago, an awareness and connection between self and other would have gradually dawned on them, creating the first sparks of human self-awareness. She described how the instinctive creation of ritual separation from the larger community during the women's bleeding time at the dark moon would have served to integrate and to communicate their changing consciousness. This story and theory suggests that menstrual separation rituals emerged as a primary means of communicating the ineffable, the first expressions of human consciousness, communication, and culture. With the act of sitting together in the dark, the early women entered a new world of consciousness. Their minds became human through an externalized vision that had as yet, and perhaps for millennia to come, no other expression than menstrual separation, the creation of consciousness by distinguishing menstruation from other activities. There is a thread that connects many strands of woman-centered spiritual history through the sacralization and honoring of ordinary female experience. I explored examples where indigenous menstruality is being reclaimed or is enduring from diverse locations in Africa, North America, and the Pacific Islands. A common theme that arose across other differences was the equation of menstruation with power and the importance of safeguarding that power so that it might be of benefit to the community as a whole. I learned that rites of passage associated with the first menstruation, or menarche, were prevalent in the cultures across North America at the time of first contact with Europeans. These were also some of the first cultural practices that were relinquished because of the way that they made newly initiated girls vulnerable to sexual assault by settlers who took these celebrations as invitation for predatory violence. This is the cover of Dr. Kucha Risling-Baldy's book. She is a Hupa scholar from Northern California who documented and participated in the revitalization of her tribe's coming of age ceremony, the flower dance. She explained that reclaiming such traditions is a form of decolonizing activist praxis that is not about trying to return to an idealized past, but about creating necessary healing for the present and future of their women and for the benefit of the whole community. Indigenous scholarship from multiple locations is correcting errors made by Western anthropologists who frequently misrepresented cultural practices such as menstrual separation by projecting their own biases of assumed disgust. For example, the word often translated as menstrual hut, which tends to connote something shabby, shameful, and dejected. I learned from Risling-Baldy that in Hupa language, the more accurate translation would be something like, quote, dear little house, unquote. These homes were used not only for menstruation, but also for caring for women in the postpartum time with their new little babies. Sobonfu Some shared traditions from her indigenous Dagara culture of Burkina Faso, Africa, traditions which have not been colonized and thus retain a sense of honor and sacredness in the initiation rituals of girls coming to age at menarche. She described how these feelings then endure throughout a woman's life. Sobonfu described menstruation as, quote, a time of power. It is a time of beauty. It is a time of connecting with the moon. It is time to bless and to give deep thanks. I never doubted when I have had my menses, what a wonderful time this is, unquote. Immersion in this aspect of my research opened a longing within to know what I might find from within the pre-patriarchal past, within lands closer to where my own ancestors came from. What ancient clues might be buried in the earth there around how to reclaim the sacredness of the feminine and open possibilities to experience divinity within menstrual fertile embodiment. Coming from ancient Sumeria, the epic tale of Inanna's descent to the underworld to meet her dark chthonic sister Ereshkigal presented itself to me within this research as an archetypal menstrual myth. In journeying to meet her sister, Inanna goes to meet her own subterranean menstrual self, wherein her outer worldly ego self must be sacrificed completely. When she reemerges, resurrected, having faced her own darkness, she then embodies an archetype of wholeness and thus comes fully into her power. equally a goddess of love and war. Inanna's story was one of the first to be carved into stone. And then it was literally buried under the earth for most of the past 4,000 years of patriarchy. She is resurrected now into our consciousness at this very time in history, revealing the divine feminine as fully in her power, actualizing a fierce sexual dignity and embodied sense of sovereignty. I would like to share one poem from the literary canon of Enheduanna. Enheduanna was a high priestess, poetess, and daughter of the first Akkadian emperor, who lived around 2250 BC. She is also our very first author of record. Many of her writings describe an intimate and devotional relationship with her beloved goddess Inanna. One example is this hymn written in Inanna's voice, and this translation was offered by Betty Deschamps Meador. It begins, "This song is holy. Let me tell you where I'm coming from. My vulva is the power place, a royal sign. I rule with cunt power. I see with cunt eyes. This is where I'm coming from." Robin Wall Kimmerer advised listening to the messages left by our ancestors through a process she called, quote, walking back along the ancestral path, unquote. Encountering her injunction, I asked myself, where might I find an ancestral path that I could walk back along that would show me how to heal myself and my lineage? How far back beyond the witch craze would I need to travel? What traces remained after the burnings? I feared that most of the women's wisdom of my lineage was lost during that time, as it was unwritten and largely undocumented. I wondered, do my ancestors dance for me? And so I began looking for empowering representations of the divine feminine within Celtic mythology and tradition. The Celtic otherworld describes a non-dual spiritual reality, not separate from the world we inhabit, but existing right alongside visible reality, interwoven and interconnected. At certain places in the landscape and at certain times of the year, the veil between these worlds is thinner and communication between them becomes easier. Otherworld female is a Celtic description of the divine feminine. Primary among these is the Cailleach, a supernatural old woman or hag. She embodies the land itself. She is also the geotectonic force that shapes the land. Her power is evident in the strength of the sea and the raging of storms. Morrigan is a Celtic goddess of war and sexuality. Her name has been interpreted variously as Great Queen, Queen of the Sea, Queen of the She, or the fairies. She is fluid, fertile, and death-dealing. And she can shapeshift, often appearing as a crow. The friendly-looking, vulva-spreading figure at the top is called Sheila Nagig. She could be considered a liminal goddess, appearing within doorways, a guardian of thresholds, including the portal of birth. Her wide open vulva may indeed invite passage to the mystical otherworld. The work of Sharon Blackie was an important part of this research, through her weaving of old Celtic stories with contemporary stories of personal female empowerment, as an essential rising force being reclaimed for the healing of the world today. In response to the legendary question, what do women want? The answer is clear. Quote, women want sovereignty to take up their ancient role as the moral and spiritual authority of the land, unquote. From this place of authority, they may rightfully claim their inherent autonomy with full sovereignty over their reproductive lives and bodies. The culmination of my heroine's journey led to Red School. At last, I found the women who have fully articulated the spiritual depth and potential inherent in the menstrual fertility cycle. Alexandra Pope and Shani Hugo Wurlitzer founded Red School in 2014. The practice they have developed is not a resurrection or reclamation of ancient practices, nor is it an appropriation of traditions from other cultures. Rather, MCA, menstrual cycle awareness, is entirely emergent. It is relevant to and in response to this current moment now. It encompasses thoroughly modern insights and developments from depth, somatic, and transpersonal psychologies, while also being influenced by mysticism, alchemy, and teachings about initiation that come from various indigenous wisdom traditions. They developed a map of the 4 inner seasons around which an entire cosmology of spiritual purpose and meaning has been elaborated. The first half of the cycle, from menstruation to ovulation, is recognized as a rising yang energy, which they call the via positiva. Then, from ovulation, the power of yin energy gathers one back toward menstruation through the via negativa. The unique contributions of Red School bring new ways of approaching menstruality that offer engagement with the entire cycle as a spiritual practice and as a path to cultivating personal and creative power. It brings a monthly opportunity to experience ego dissolution and reconstruction toward flexible personality development and psychological healing. Shani and Alexandra walk their talk entirely. They have listened deeply into the field of menstruality itself to receive these teachings and share them. And they continue to do so, making it an entirely fluid and responsive, ever emergent practice. In my humble opinion, Alexandra Pope and Shani Hugo Wurlitzer ought rightly to be acknowledged as 2 of the most important thought leaders, spiritual teachers, and visionaries alive on our planet today. As Alexandra described, the menstrual cycle is coded to support you. It is leading you back home. It has your back. Each cycle is an opportunity for emotional healing and spiritual growth. When engaged consciously, the years of menstrual cycling are then the perfect preparation to meet the initiatory potentials available at menopause. One of Red School's many significant contributions is the way that they are framing menopause as an initiation into power, authority, and purpose. Of course, this initiatory rite of passage follows the archetypal cycle process of death and rebirth. It allows for surrender to the death of the younger woman ego that is necessary to be relinquished so that one may emerge into a greater sense of wholeness, self-awareness, self-love, and inner knowing as the basis of a conscious and empowered elderhood. Finding Red School as I did right in the midst of this initiatory process made all the difference in supporting me to develop a deeper self-compassion and understanding around the challenges I was facing. It helped me find the hope and inner confidence that I would survive the transformation and come out stronger, clearer, and more myself. The critical importance of ushering women and other menstruators through this passage consciously cannot be overstated. It is time for these elders to consciously take up our moral authority for the leadership and guidance that the patriarchal world has lacked for many centuries. In the immortal words of June Jordan from her poem for South African women written in 1978, quote, "We are the ones we have been waiting for," unquote. This is what I think of when I look at this picture of the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. These elders are wisdom keepers, spiritual leaders, and activists from around the world who work to preserve Indigenous traditions, protect the earth, and promote peace, healing, and justice. They are the medicine we all need. As our beloved Sobonfu Some described from the Dagara perspective, menopause is the process of transforming your menstrual energy into the water of life that becomes your offering for the whole community. This is water with the power to bless. I believe this project has been shown to hold broad significance in 3 realms. As an academic contribution, it expands possibilities for feminist and transpersonal psychology research, and it positions menstruality as a legitimate epistemological field. Its social and political impacts include offering MFCA as praxis that champions and supports reproductive justice and reproductive abolition. It offers a powerful challenge to the stigma and medicalization of menstruation and reproduction, and it provides necessary tools for holistic reproductive health education and advocacy. The spiritual significance of this research is not separate from its political and personal goals. It supports the spiritual awakening and actualization of menstrual fertile bodies toward an earth bodyful restoration of the dark feminine, fostering balance and harmony in the world. This dissertation has formed the backdrop to my own menopausal initiation, which included being ravaged by my passage through grief and unutterable loss. KHTHôNIA has both pulverized me and deeply held me through it all. Completing this work has been a healing that required confronting and releasing crippling self-doubt and perfectionism. It has enabled me to develop an ever-increasing fidelity to myself, to my truth, and to my voice. I have learned from wise woman Carolyn Hillier, quote, "The first rule of the Hag Road, your tenderness is invaluable to you and to your world. Protect it well and toughen up," unquote. Indeed, I have been toughened and softened in countless ways through this process. It has been a journey towards self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and wholeness. This wholeness is the ability to embrace all parts of myself, all seasons, and to let go into trust. Trust in my body, trust in my process. I trust in the experience of being held by the earth, held by the cycle. This is my liberation. Thank you for listening to me today and for receiving this presentation of my dissertation.
Thank you, Virginia. Well done. What an absolute distillation of all of the years of hard work and dedication that you have put into this project. We're going to take some time to engage in some question and answer as a committee. I have so much I want to ask and just be in continued conversation with you around this, Virginia. I know that it's involved a lot of sweat and tears and so much of you. Um, and I'm really there's several things I'm curious about, but I think one of the things that I'm going to ask right now, since we're kind of you're in this place of final reflection and holding all that you have done, I'm wondering what are some of your ideas around how you want to carry this work forward
Mm,
and perhaps make it accessible to some of the communities that it's intended to support in liberatory practices and embodiment awareness. I mean, I love the term that you came up with, this embody-fulness. You know, there's a lot of really wonderful ways in which you've conceptualized and created some um, interwoven theoretical foundations. And, you know, how do you sort of envision this for yourself, carrying it forward, and making it accessible to those it's intended for?
yeah, thank you. That's such a great question. And I think the answer is that I don't necessarily have all the answers for that. I definitely like my first idea is just to get the word out, and I really espouse the idea that I've learned from Black liberation philosophy, the sort of each one teach one idea, that we just like, I think the more that we're talking about this and sharing all these like options and possibilities, um, just getting the word out. And on the piece of earth bodyfulness, like I also really believe in like community-based education and people coming together in real life. Like, one of the great things that the Red School is doing is that they have a huge online platform that is able to like reach all around the world, and I think that's really great. And there's definitely needs to be a place for that. And I'm also just really looking forward myself to like doing grassroots on the ground small community like gatherings of just like coming together and kind of asking different people in different communities like what do you need, what about these practices, does any of this resonate with you, what how could this fit in your life, um yeah, so that's sort of how I'm thinking of it. A lot of questions more than answers, really. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is, a sign of good research, right? As to what questions does it then bring up?
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I'm just going to ask one more question and then I'll hand it over to Annette and Brianne for your questions because I'm sure that you also have some questions that you would like to ask. I think it was towards the beginning of the presentation you talked about the the menstrual or fertile body having a situated body of knowledge.
Mhm.
And you also referred to your own heroine's journey.
Mm.
And I'm wondering for yourself, you know, just holding that heuristic element of your research, how you as a situated body, fertile
Mhm.
body of knowledge, and I know that you spoke to this a little bit in sort of moving into menopause, but I'm wondering if maybe you could speak to kind of a key point of understanding or awareness that occurred for you as a
Mhm.
result of engaging in the research and the writing of this work.
Uh-huh. Um, Sorry, I can't say that last part again. The
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to point towards is really a key emergent understanding of your own self as a
Mhm.
situated body of knowledge, carrying all of this information and lived experience And just, because I'm sure that I know that there were multiple points, but I'm just wondering for you what you felt was kind of perhaps the crux of,
Yeah,
transformation for you, and to speak to that.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of very complicated, and there's a lot I could say on this, but like one of the things was that I was aware of my like positionality and my privilege as like a middle class, very educated white woman. And when I learned the fertility awareness practices, I was like, everybody should have this. Why doesn't everybody have this? And I think it was just like a really big and important like part of my research was like recognizing that there were like so many reasons that like greater body literacy and reproductive education and empowerment is not available to many portions of the population. And I mean, I think it would even be fair to say that in the beginning I had a little bit of that kind of white savior, like I want to just bring this to everybody. And it was like I really had to go through a process of my own, like educating myself about like understanding what are the barriers that get in the way, like what is the actual situation going on, and then learning the history and finding out like how my reproduction as a white woman has been used to directly oppress other women of color's reproduction throughout history. It's like I just feel like that is history that like we all need to be aware of. And like if there's ever going to be any collaboration or any kind of solidarity between menstrual fertile bodies, like there has to be some reckoning with that past. So that was really like, and I would say like all that part of the research where I was studying the witch craze and reproductive injustice and oppression, and that was like fully like my descent part of this journey. And then I would say like the like seeking liberation and looking to like indigenous wisdom and wisdom in other cultures. But then I really like got like, oh, the most important healing that I need to do is about my lineage and my culture and my body. And like I'm the one I need to save. Like that is like basically what came through most clearly in this research. Yeah.
Thank you, Virginia. I
Yeah.
see some hearts coming through. Uh, okay, I would love to pass it over to Annette and Brianna. I don't know who would like to jump in next.
Oh, Virginia, this is truly just a beautiful, comprehensive work. I have so many appreciations. I know we have limited time, but one of the main ones really is just your self-awareness and humility in the process, your
Mm,
personal standpoint, the way that was stated and articulated in the dissertation.
mm,
And it's such an important part in terms of feminist research to really state who you are in relationship to the topic that you're studying or that you're covering.
mm,
Appreciation is just your, but of course, your methodology and this framing menstrual and fertility council awareness within this network, theoretical frameworks and network, just really rich.
mm,
Um, and the outstanding provision of historical context and connection to current attitudes and
mm,
current laws in terms of women's reproductive suppression and in terms of the counter on women's rights and freedom, as well as all the psychosocial realities that we're living currently.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that was important. I mean, I have my list here. Let me go, let me go to a question for time. Um, Okay, so you mentioned like the wide spectrum of social locations that could benefit
Mm,
from menstrual and fertility cycle awareness and the ritual power that men in many cultures ascribe to menstruation. Um,
mhm,
in terms of night, I have a question. So, in their dissertation, you mentioned night and the consideration of the practice of male menstruation, like the
mm,
gashing their genitals in a mimicry of menstruation. So, first thinking, well, how could menstrual fertility cycle awareness actually be a benefit to men? I have my little list in ways it could be a benefit to men, but I like to do that. Yeah.
I love this question so much, Annette, and it's very close to my heart, you know, as a mother of two sons. And you know, I recognize like my whole journey with myself has been around my healing of my body as a woman, but my deepest desire is that this healing also be for my sons and for men. You know, it's like I really believe that part of healing the split is, it's like not only do people who embody, you know, menstrual fertility cycles, like so many of us don't know anything about that, and learning and educating ourselves about that is so important. But also, you know, it's like I feel like boys are taught from a very young age that like this is something they don't get to know anything about, and girls have to hide it from boys, and boy, you know, even like brothers and sisters sometimes, like it's just like sets up this big like divide and like antagonism really, and the ways gender are is like, you know, formed around all of that. And so like I feel really deeply that like sharing this knowledge with boys and men so that they are, you know, they are just as much earth as women are. You know, women have historically kind of been associated with earth, and but men are just as much earth. Everybody is part of the earth, you know. And so cycle consciousness is something that everybody is included in, is held in, you know. And you know, I mentioned early on that like menstrual cycle awareness could also be framed as moon cycle awareness. And I don't have a menstrual cycle anymore, but I've been a really beautiful part of my journey has been learning to track with the cycles of the moon. And I feel like everybody could benefit from being more in tune with what's going on in the moon, and also like the seasons throughout the year, and even like, you know, cycles of rest. I mean, like activity and rest during the day. It's just like cycle consciousness, I feel like, is a medicine that's widely beneficial to everybody. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank
I feel like I could talk on and on and on, but it's like not only beneficial, but also empowering, like you say. It's like,
Okay, thank you. I think I'll stop here for the bit for time. Yeah, thank you
yeah,
so much.
I just want to name Annette. Like I feel like so moved to have you on my committee. I have so much respect for you as a scholar, and I just want to like really like call out how I met you is, you know, through my dear friend May Elowar and the writing group. When you all were working on your PhD dissertations, you know, as a group of mostly women of color who were getting their PhDs, and just like the beauty and the wisdom and the intelligence, and like I was like, all of you were such a huge inspiration for me to feel like I could do something like that too. And so just thank you. It's like just been so special to have you and your support in this. Thank you, Annette.
Like,
Thank you so
I
much.
I'm trying. It's such a beautiful and long journey, Virginia. But yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll jump in. First, I just want to say, you know, I've been on many dissertations over many years, and I've never seen attendance like this at a dissertation, number one. So just like that must say something very, very clear and poignant about your sense of community and how to sort of, I don't know, just like expand what your work is doing, not just to like the smallness of academia, but like to think about how other people can engage with it, which I think really is also such a testament to this work. I mean, I don't know, I think, you know, I'm sure some people in this group here have not attended a dissertation defense before, or maybe, you know, their family and friends who are like coming. I just want to just say again how extraordinary this dissertation is, and really how, I mean, it is sort of mind-boggling to enter a dissertation that is this thoughtful, polished, just like, I don't know, just like sort of digging into yourself, integrating so many different difficult components. I mean, the kinds of span of material that you're even serving to look at, let alone what you do with it, is astonishing, right? Going from a Agamben to, sort of old school feminist theory to brand new stuff to all this, like, critical menstruation studies work to feminist spirituality. I mean, just like, it's, most dissertations like do not have the scope and ambition and polish and, I don't know, all the words. So I just want to say again, like, this is an extraordinary piece of work, and I'm sure we could all see that in your presentation, just how unique it is, and how, I don't know, just how much of the self is present in this work, which, it's really, I always am, um there's a process for me where I'm always lamenting when people leave their undergraduate days. They sometimes become more distant from their work. They kind of, when they're undergrads, they're right up close and sort of in it. And then as a grad student, I think the process of professionalization sometimes makes them more distant from their work. And you did the exact opposite. And I just think it's so clear that you are like unwilling to have um, the things that happen to a lot of grad students, where they get distant to sort of seem professional or try on professionalism, and then they lose that sense of just like real skin in the game. So I just want to say some general comments before I go into my questions, that this
Thank
is
you.
it's unique. It's amazing that you're able to kind of, I don't know, just maintain the closeness. And also, a project that you've worked on this long sometimes can start to feel torturous. So I'm glad that it hasn't, or at least it seemingly hasn't in this moment. And this, the celebrations are worthy, and yeah, it's great. So um yeah, so I think my question, especially given the political period that we're living in and things like this, I'm really interested in your dissertation, how you're sort of thinking about um various versions of, like, you, I don't think you phrase it this way, but sort of thinking about oppression and resistance as bodily, right? So there's like the kind of movement between how we use our bodies to make new narratives and make new stories, and how we use them, how they are also like the site of how we take on cultural baggage and how we take on other people's projections. Even like your stories about the kind of framing of the menstrual hut was like exactly what I mean by this, right? This kind of oppression and resistance, and how sites of oppression then become resistance, sites of resistance sometimes can become sites of oppression, and how menstruation kind of plays this central role in that. And I'm just wondering if you could think a little bit about that, and also about the ways that menstruation in particular is such an interesting site of being so concrete, right? Like, we bleed, we have to materially deal with the blood and all of this, but also there's so much, as your dissertation so brilliantly sort of expounds, right? So much abstract, um, mythological, even connective tissue kind of stuff that is not at all about the bodily or the concrete aspects. And so that tension point too. So I want you to think about just like those movements between oppression and resistance, and concrete and abstract, or concrete and cerebral maybe. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that question. And yeah, I feel like one of the things that I really hope to do with this dissertation, and that was definitely part of my process as well, was basically taking it as a healing of that split, and like everything you spoke to in the beginning about academia. And it's just like I feel like I kind of came from a long legacy of a lot of intellectualizing kind of in my head, and in the process of this work, it was just like more and more and more important to me to come into my body, into my own experience, into like yeah, just like making it real and making it tangible as the place from which to resist, as the place from which like revolution needs to happen. Because again, like theory is great, and it's really important to have like all these different like ideas and perspectives, and kind of the the way that I set up the praxis, where it's like the first level of the praxis has to be your relationship with yourself. It has to be in the body. It has to be like empowered there. And it's just like for all resistance movements, for all revolutions, you know, which historically sometimes can get really heady and theoretical and then lose their root in what they were trying to achieve. You know, we know lots of examples of that. So it's like the importance, I feel like the importance of like starting from self and from body, but with a mind to like global and social change is kind of the whole point. Yeah. It's like I said in the beginning, like this is a very theoretical dissertation, but none of it exists without the actual practice of just checking in with yourself every day and having some sort of relationship with your cycle. If you are a menstrual fertile person, that cycle, or it could be with the moon or the sun or the seasons, you know, just like that we become stronger politically and toward like empowered when we are connected with our bodies, and then of course with one another, you know, from that place. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I really want to thank you, Brian, for your support of this project and your just enthusiasm after you read my dissertation. It just like really meant so much to me to be received. I have so much respect for you as a scholar, and you know, reading especially what's the book? It's one of my favorite books. It's gonna escape.
Out for Blood, that one.
Out for Blood.
Yeah.
Everybody should go read this amazing book. Yeah, it was just like such a inspiring
good
work there. So thank you for being on my committee. Yeah.
Oh, it's been a joy. It's been a joy.
Okay. Annette, do you have any final questions you would like to ask Virginia before we deliberate?
So many.
I know. I guess I should say within the time constraints that we're working with.
Another appreciation. I was just co-facilitating a gender healing workshop this weekend, and just your inclusivity, your inclusion of transgender is in here. I just have I'll just read it. I'm quoting Virginia here. The perspectives of people who identify as transgender need to be considered and respected so as not to reenact the same harm done to women whose realities have been so often defined by men. Possibilities for coalition building become possible through a shift in focus from a sense of shared identities as biological women toward instead a sense of shared resistance to gender oppression and all gender hierarchies. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. I think this is a good time for myself and Annette and Brianne to go into a breakout room. And while we're deliberating, it's certainly a time for everybody who is here in attendance to continue to engage in questions and discussion with Virginia. And then we'll return shortly.
Thank you. Judy, will you field the questions? Yeah, great. Thanks.
Absolutely. And I just opened the rooms for the committee, so hopefully you're seeing that and going in. I will definitely field the questions. I just have to tell you that I've been kind of fighting tears the entire time of the dissertation. And I just feel so seen, like across the board. Like every aspect of me feels so seen, and that's so rare. So thank you so much for that. And then yeah, I'll open the room to questions. And if you could use your hand emoji.
I just want to say, Judy, like that is the biggest compliment I could receive. Is just like you feeling seen. That's all I want to do is feel seen. I want everybody to feel like that their stuff is great. Yeah. Thank you.
And might I add, I'm not sure if this is entirely appropriate, but Elliot would be so proud, Virginia.
Oh, thank you, Natalie.
So proud.
From you. Thank you. Thank you. I know he is. Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in because
It's
I just want to say Dr. Blue before anybody comes back because we know that's the
Knock on
truth,
wood.
right? And I'm the co-chair of the program, so it's already a done deal. But I actually have to leave. I've got to go to a student meeting. But I just want to say, Virginia, I agree with what your committee said. Brilliant, beautiful. I love the questions that they asked. But honestly, like Brianna said, this is an extraordinary piece of work and it has to be put out. I hope that you will somehow disseminate it, make small versions of it, separate it out, like hold workshops, come and do guest teaching in the program. What a profound, tender, embodied praxis. What a beautiful act of revolution, I think. Soulful, transformative, evocative, like you name it. Like I'm so proud of you. Congratulations, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Ishtar. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, that's an honor.
Really wonderful to see you. Mm.
If anyone has questions or just reflections for Virginia, again, just unmute yourself, but I think, or raise your hand, either one. It's fine.
I'm just gonna get a little bit of water, but I'm right here.
Hi, I know I don't have my camera on because I'm a little disheveled, but hi Virginia. My name's Caitlin. I'm from the TID department actually.
Oh,
And I came to your dissertation defense today because I'm also writing my dissertation using the dark feminine and Inanna as a framework for an in-person qualitative study. So
oh my
I just wanted to introduce myself quickly
wow.
and
Yeah,
would
let's
love
hang
to
out.
I would love to have your dissertation for the theoretical part of my writing because a lot of a lot of the words that I was trying to figure out via theory, I couldn't quite get my little embodied hands on, and really just what you're saying is amazing, and this was so good and I want to work with you more.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. Caitlin, hit me up. I'd love to like connect in real time and hear all about your project. That sounds awesome.
Yes, and congratulations. This is beautiful. As a person who's also been working for 7 years
Yeah.
through grief and through all this, I'm very excited to chat with you.
Yeah.
Beautiful dissertation.
Thank you so much.
If there's space, Virginia, I'm curious, like, this is so much information and so much beautiful weaving, and thank you for giving the definitions in the beginning, because when you sent the invite, I was like, whoa, okay. I'm gonna have to learn a little bit to understand what's going on here. But what is kind of like one of your big takeaways, because it is something that's so academic and at the same time so personal? And you've talked about this kind of transformative journey, and in my experience, like that's what a PhD really is. It's like a kind of an institutionalized transformation. And so, like, now that you've done your defense and it's been so well attended, and I don't know, like, what is something that just feels like kind of a nugget?
Oh, that's hard.
I mean, and I'm sure that there's so many, but you can share a couple if we have the space. If other people have specific questions, that's great too.
Yeah, first I just want to respond to like all the big words in the title, and I had to learn a lot of big words in the process of writing this dissertation, but my real desire was to do something that like jump through all the academic hoops, I guess, but also like ended up being like very accessible, vernacular. Like this is all about like, and maybe this is the nugget to answer your question. It's like, it's really at the deepest level is a self-love praxis and practice. And so it's like what tuning to the cycle in this way really supports is just like learning to trust your own body, your own experience, your own feelings, you know, like, and then how that relates to just sort of like the different social locations that people live in. It's like everybody has their own truth and their own experience. And I really want to be participating in creating a world where all voices are welcome and all truths are important. But we have to start with like believing that our own story is valid, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Natalie. So good to see you here.
You too.
We're back.
You're back.
You know.
We are back. Yes, yes. And yeah, and I'm sure that I hope that you've all have had a good discussion while we were deliberating. I want to say that in our deliberation, in many ways, it was very easy. The decision across the committee on Virginia, on your work, was unanimous. We all believe and feel that you have done a fantastic dissertation in so many ways. And I think that there's so many ways in which we can describe the depth and the breadth of the work that you have done, and all of the heart and scholarship that has gone into your work. But we want to, in this moment, congratulate you on a successful completion of your doctoral work and defense, and to announce for the first time you as Dr. Virginia Blue. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's gonna take a while for that to sink in.
Yes, yes.
Congratulations, as Dr. Virginia Blue.
Thank you, Annette. Well, and thank you just everyone for participating in this birth and this transformative moment with me. Like literally everyone who showed up today, I'm so humbled and honored just seeing all these beautiful faces of people that I love so much, and people that I don't know yet. But yeah, just thank you for your support, thank you for your love, thank you everybody. I could not have done this alone in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, thank you.
Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.